Chapter 3, Prenatal Development. So far in class, we have learned about the history of the field of child development, the different theories involved, and how our genes and the environment interact to produce development. Today, we are going to begin talking about how a human is actually formed. So, as I'm sure you know, um, prenatal development starts with conception. So, the sperm and ovum unite to form a new individual. Every 28 days, in the midst of a woman's menstrual cycle, an ovum bursts from the woman's ovaries and is drawn into the fallopian tubes. The corpus luteum secretes hormones to receive a fertilized ovum, but if the ovum is not fertilized, i.e., pregnancy does not occur, then the corpus luteum shrinks and the lining of the uterus is discharged. 300 million sperm is produced per day in the testes. And then the great race begins. The sperm have a tail to swim upstream to the female reproductive tract, through the cervix, and into the fallopian tube. This is where fertilization occurs. Fun fact, sperm can live up to 6 days and lie in wait in the ovum. This is why it's important to use protection. Development begins and pregnancy can last for 38 weeks in 3 phases. So that's the chart I have on the screen here. So rather than spend a lot of time on going through this for you, it's all very straightforward. I am going to link some videos that show you each phase and explain what's happening in each one. Those will be on Blackboard for you to watch, or you can just read about it in your textbook. It's pretty straightforward. It just tells you what happens from conception to 4 weeks, at 8 weeks, 12 weeks, so on and so on. I'm going to talk a little bit about brain development a little in depth. So brain development begins around 8 weeks, and at about 23 weeks, connections between neurons begin to occur. So researchers found that babies in the womb can learn from events occurring outside of their mother, which is pretty cool. I know you might have heard about like that you should talk to the baby and that they can hear you, they can learn your voice, they may react to your voice. You may have heard that you should play Mozart or something for them to make them smart, which is not true, but they can hear things. Um, so there is a study that's talked about in your textbook that asked pregnant women to read a passage from Dr. Seuss, The Cat in the Hat, twice a day for at least 6 weeks of their pregnancies, um, for a total of pre-birth exposure to the story of about 3.5 hours. So that's how many hours the baby heard the story over the course of the pregnancy. Then, a few days after the babies were born, the researchers outfitted the newborns with a pacifier that could record the baby's sucking rates in response to a tape to their mothers reading either The Cat in the Hat or an unfamiliar story. The babies could control which of the two stories they heard by either increasing or decreasing their sucking rate. They found that the newborns modified their sucking rate to hear The Cat in the Hat, and that they concluded that the babies had heard and remembered the stories that their mothers had read to them while they were in the womb. So basically, what they found was that the babies remembered hearing The Cat in the Hat before they were born, and they preferred to hear that story versus a story they didn't recognize. If you plan to go into a field where you will be working with pregnant women or you plan on having children yourself, you will definitely be interested to know what expectant mothers can do to keep herself healthy and improve her baby's chances of being born healthy. We often just hear about things to avoid, like smoking and drinking, but we rarely focus on actually enhancing prenatal care. So the first one is nutrition and weight gain. So nutrition has a strong influence on the development of the fetus. A maternal weight gain of about 25 to 35 pounds is associated with the best reproductive outcomes. But of course, this is going to vary from mother to mother. It's recommended that the mother gains about 2 to 4 pounds during the first trimester and then an average of 1 pound a week during the last 2 trimesters. Obesity in expectant mothers is linked to developmental problems such as preterm birth, neural tube defects, and the formation of diabetes in adolescent offspring. It also increases the risk for the mother. She is more likely to develop diabetes and respiratory complications. So this is why it's important for expecting mothers to manage their weight gain and eat nutritious meals. I think it's typically in the zeitgeist that when you're pregnant, you have cravings and you just get to eat whatever you want, and you're supposed to gain weight, so it doesn't matter. but that can be really dangerous and have really serious side effects on both the mother and the fetus. Also, an expecting mother requires more vitamins than the general public. There's a list of different vitamins on the screen here, and this is talked about in your textbook as well, um, about which kind of vitamins and nutrition is explained a little bit more. But in conjunction with nutrition, exercise can be beneficial. Again, this is going to be dependent on the mother. So if you exercise a lot before you get pregnant, it's pretty generally safe to keep exercising. Obviously, not to the same extent, but you can exercise. If you've never exercised in your life and you want to start after you get pregnant, that's going to be a little more dangerous. You're going to have to go slower. So you shouldn't just start exercising. You should definitely talk to a doctor. The type of exercise recommended depends on the stage of pregnancy. So during the later part of the pregnancy, low impact activities are going to be recommended. Um, and this really just makes sense that you should exercise when you're pregnant because it, even if you're not pregnant, exercising has a lot of benefits like lowering stress, lowering levels of depression, giving you better sleep. And all of these things can lead to pregnant women having a better chance at a healthy pregnancy as well. And then I just wanted to mention a nonprofit organization called the Nurse Family Partnership, which offers first-time mothers free visits by a nurse both before and after their baby is born. This program offers education to new mothers as well as tracking the health of the mother and child, which is really cool because if you've had kids before, you know that having a child for the very first time could be really scary because you have no idea what to do. You don't know what you should be doing to be healthy, what the child should be doing to be healthy, what the hallmarks are, what you should look for. So having a nurse that can come to your house and do check-ins with you both before you give birth and after is really beneficial, especially in low-income neighborhoods. So of course, we do have to cover the hazards to prenatal development. These you probably know a little more already. You may have heard of some of these already. The word is teratogens. You'll see this in your textbook, and this refers to any environmental agent that causes damage during the prenatal period. The harm done by teratogens is not always simple and straightforward. So things like dose are going to matter. So if you're talking about drugs, if you have obviously a higher dose is probably going to cause more damage than a lower dose. Larger doses over longer time periods usually have the most negative effects. So those are things like prescription drugs would be a good example. If you're taking a high dose over a long period of time, you're going to see worse effects than if you take maybe one or two doses over the whole course of the pregnancy. Another thing that's going to make it dependent is your heredity. So the genetic makeup of the mother and the developing fetus play an important role. So some individuals are better able than others to withstand harmful environments, and that's just part of the genetics. Um, so every case could potentially be different. Also, the presence of other negative influences. So if you have several negative factors at once, so teratogens plus poor nutrition plus a lack of medical care, all of that can worsen the impact of the harmful agent. Um, Age may be a factor as well. I think it talks in your textbook that older women tend to have more babies born with Down syndrome. So age might have an influence over how the teratogens affect the fetus as well. So let's talk about drugs for a second here. So babies born to users of drugs are at risk for a wide variety of problems, including prematurity, low birth weight, physical defects, breathing difficulties, and death around the time of birth. In addition, these infants are born drug addicted. They are often feverish and irritable, and their cries are abnormally shrill, which is a common symptom among stressed newborns. They tend to have feeding and behavior problems that are likely to persist throughout childhood as well. Um, After infancy, some children do get better while others remain jittery and inattentive. The kind of parenting they receive may explain why some problems persist and some do not. So I saw an example of this in a documentary. I don't remember what the documentary was called, but it was about the cocaine in LA in the 80s, um, and the boom of that. And so one of the men who was really right in the middle of that and was cooking it in his home, he never did the drug. His girlfriend never did the drug. They never did cocaine, smoked it, nothing. But she was pregnant during the time that he was cooking batches of it in their kitchen, and their baby was born addicted. And so even just that having that in the air and in their house, in their environment, really strongly affected their prenatal development. And I think she was deformed as well. So you don't have to even be taking it directly. If it's in your environment, it could have serious effects on a fetus. Evidence suggests that some cocaine-exposed babies develop lasting difficulties. Cocaine constricts the blood vessels, causing oxygen delivered to the developing organism to fall for 15 minutes following a high dose. It can also alter production and functioning of neurons and the chemical balance in the fetus's brain. These effects may contribute to eye, bone, genital, urinary tract, kidney, and heart deformities, brain hemorrhages and seizures, and severe growth retardation. Marijuana, the most widely used illegal drug, has been linked to low birth weight and smaller head size, which is also used as a measure of brain growth. There's been a link to marijuana with low attention, bad memory, and academic difficulties and depression in childhood. Um, oh, and also poor problem-solving performance in adolescence. Um, Environmental hazards. So radiation is a big one. Radiation can create underdeveloped brains and also physical deformities and slow growth. Emotional states and stress. So we talked about this a little bit when we talked about exercise. So if you have a pregnant mother who is very stressed out, who is living in a very stressful environment or otherwise is in a very strong negative emotional state, that can have severe effects on her developing fetus as well. I'm going to link some videos that explain that a little bit more. Yep, there it is. Other hazards, you might think about, what some other hazards are. So we didn't talk about smoking or drinking, but those are the big ones. So I'm pretty sure you know about those. And also just consider that the father plays a role in this as well. So if the father is smoking or drinking in the home, that might cause a stressful environment for the mother, which can affect her. Um, Even if the father is drinking or doing drugs before the mother even gets pregnant, that's going to affect his sperm, which can then affect the development of the fetus, or it might keep them from getting pregnant at all. So it goes both ways. Both parents play a role whenever we're talking about hazards and ways to have a great pregnancy, great prenatal development. And lastly, this is a picture here of, this is from your textbook as well. It just shows you the prenatal development and the different critical periods. So like you can see for the central nervous system, that from week 3 to week 16 is a pretty critical period here. And you can look at this chart and just kind of see. So then you could predict, like, well, what would happen with physical development, which parts would be affected if you were to start drinking um, heavily from week 4 to week 8. What areas would be affected and those kinds of things. You can look at that in more depth in your textbook. This picture is in there. But that is all for this chapter.